Good morning. The Hearing Board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District is in session. Today is Thursday, October 31st, 2019, obviously Halloween. Time is just after 9 o'clock a.m., and we are meeting in the Hearing Board room in Diamond Bar. We have one change to our schedule, our calendar today, and that is James Hardy Building Products, Inc., case number 5694-2 for a short variance was taken off calendar. We have one remaining matter for today, and that is the City of Riverside. I'm going to say this wrong. Tequesquite Landfill. We'll get there. Tequesquite Landfill for an emergency variance. And who is representing the City of Riverside today?
Good morning, Chair. My name is Anthony Beaumont, Deputy City Attorney for the City of Riverside.
And can you spell your last name, please?
B-E-A-U-M-O-N.
Thank you, Beaumont. Okay. And who is representing the executive officer today?
Sherry Hani-Zavara on behalf of the executive officer.
Thank you. And board members, this comes to us today. Hopefully we all have it with an ex parte. This facility is under ex parte relief for emergency. And today we're going to have this hearing as we would normally have an emergency variance hearing, which is we're going to bifurcate the hearing. And so the first part of the hearing will be to determine whether we have good cause to proceed in absence of notice to the public. And so those elements that we're looking for is whether the petitioner is currently in violation or that violation is imminent. Yes. Oh, sorry. For me? Oh, for all of us. Whether the circumstances that were leading to that violation could not reasonably have been avoided by petitioner or anticipated in sufficient time to provide for public notice. Then we're looking at whether the petitioner exercised diligence in petitioning for the emergency variance as soon as reasonably could have known it would need relief, and that a denial of the emergency variance would result in either an increase in emissions or an adverse impact on public health or welfare, or an unreasonable and unavoidable adverse impact to petitioners. So those are the elements that we're looking for. So we'll start with that, and then the board will deliberate on good cause after we take witnesses on that, hear openings and closing. And then if we find good cause, we will proceed to the merits for the variance, the 6 findings. So the first thing I'm going to ask is anyone who wishes to testify or give evidence in today's proceedings to please rise to be sworn in at this time. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, yes, thank you. We have received proposed emergency variance conditions, and we'll put them to the side for after good cause, but let's mark that. Is that from the district, the proposed?
Yes, and they've been shared with petitioner, and we've agreed upon them.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to mark that as Exhibit A, as in apple. Okay. So, Mr. Beaumont, if you would like at this time to give an opening on good cause.
Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Anthony Beaumont. I'm a Deputy City Attorney for the City of Riverside. The City of Riverside has a closed landfill, the Tequesquite landfill, which dates back quite a while. It's been closed, and there's a gas extraction and flaring facility on it. This facility is in a fenced-off location. We actually have solar panels on top of the landfill cap. It's kept secure. We usually don't have much for problems. Unfortunately, we have certain issues to where the homeless people who live in the river, which is immediately adjacent to this, apparently have vandalized unexpectedly our flare. We've never had anything like this before. The flare is actually away from the center of the river. We have chain link and we have some razor wire around it, but surprisingly, we found on Monday that the flare was not operating. There are various reasons why the flare would not operate, including quantity or quality of gas. Staff went out there to take a look at it, and they found out it had been vandalized, inexplicably vandalized. It turns out that somebody took a hose and flooded electronic components. Some valves are turned on, some valves are turned off, and then wires and other electronic components were actively damaged. We've never seen anything like this before. So we tried as best we could to get it running. We realized that there was a part which was necessary. Unfortunately, this part is only manufactured or available in China. We were given a 2 or 3 week lead time, but we told them to expedite it, to any extent possible. And we found out late yesterday or early this morning that the part is actually now on site. So we did indeed expedite it, and our expectation is that it will be installed and operational today or tomorrow. It'll be installed today, but there might be some fine tuning or installation. So that is the background of what happened. So we have the 4 elements for the good cause for the ex parte being that we are currently in violation, circumstances that were not avoidable or anticipated, diligence, and the effects of the denial. The city is currently in violation in that we do not have an operable flare. However, it also turns out that this thing is operated under vacuum, and the methane, to our knowledge, has not actually caught up and is not actually leaking yet. So there may actually have been no emissions today or even maybe tomorrow. But we are actually currently in violation because we do not have an operable flare. The circumstances were not really avoidable or anticipated. I mean, there's no way to know that somebody's going to come in and actually do this kind of crazy damage. However, we did obtain a spare part in the unlikely example that this would happen again. And it so turns out that we actually have 2 flares, and these flares are highly identical. And we had always anticipated that we could just operate the one and cannibalize the other as necessary. Well, it turns out this particular component is not common amongst the 2 flares, and we hadn't realized that. But we did obtain a spare to prevent this from ever happening again in the future. So given that we have chain link security around it, and we have razor wire, and this is a facility which we protect because it has solar panels on it. We had no idea that somebody was going to come in and perform these deranged actions. We think that these circumstances, it was not really avoidable or anticipated so that we could avoid the public notice process. We have been diligent. As soon as we found out it wasn't working, we went out there. As soon as we found out the part had to be ordered, we ordered it. We did expedite it. Fortunately, it didn't take 2 to 3 weeks. We were able to convince them to get it very quickly. And the denial would actually increase, I suppose, it would penalize the plant, it would penalize the public agency. This is something which happened through no fault of our own. And denial would, if we were unable to repair this, I suppose there would be possible increase in admissions, but I really don't anticipate that being an issue. So that's my opening statement, and I have a gentleman here from the Regional Water Quality Control Plant who was able to give any testimony on this that you might wish.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Robert Eland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beaumont. Ms. Honeyzabra, your opening on good cause.
Good morning, Chairwoman Prusak and members of the board. Subject to the evidence and the testimony that's presented here today, the district does not oppose a finding of good cause. Based on the facts that the district has, at least so far, it appears that petitioner was fairly diligent once the vandalism occurred in filing the ex parte for emergency relief late last week. And so, again, subject to the evidence and the testimony, the district doesn't oppose a finding of good cause.
Thank you. Mr. Beaumont, you may introduce a witness if you'd like at this time. If you can ask your witness to state and spell his name for the record, give his title, and indicate that he did take the oath this morning.
Will do. Thank you. Mr. Robert Eland from the City of Riverside, would you please introduce yourself, state your position, and agree that you had taken the oath?
Yes, my name is Robert Eland, E-L-A-N-D. I'm the wastewater resource analyst for the Regional Water Quality Control Plant, the city's wastewater plant, which also oversees compliance at the landfill. And I did take the oath this morning.
You may proceed if you have questions.
Thank you. Mr. Eland, could you please tell us what your duties are as the wastewater resources analyst at the Regional Water Quality Control Plant?
I handle regulatory compliance. It's really reviewing, interpreting, and making recommendations to ensure compliance on federal, state, and local regulations.
Thank you, and how long have you held that position?
4 years?
Have you reviewed the petition for variance filed in this matter?
Yes, I have.
And are the matters stated in that petition true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, they are.
Would you please describe what the City of Riverside's Tequesquite landfill is and what services it provides? And while he is doing so, I have an exhibit I can pass out for the board.
If you can make sure Ms. Honeyzavra has one copy, and then you can give the rest to the clerk of the board right over here.
Okay, Mr. Eland, would you please, oh, I'm sorry, do all the hearing board members have the copy, and the clerk and the staff?
Yes, I'd like to mark them. I just want to see what we've got. Okay, so we've got one, I guess, I don't know, photograph of the site, and in the upper left corner, it says City of Riverside, Tequesquite. And so we'll mark that as exhibit number 1, that photograph. It's like an aerial photograph. We also have, is this the entire permit, or is this sections of the permit to operate?
Entire permits.
This is the entire permit.
Okay, so we have,
I don't know if you need to mark those as an
Oh, are they
exhibit. There's
two?
more photographs following.
sorry, there are 2. Okay. We've got the permit for, which is first, the flare. The permit for the flare, we're going to mark as exhibit number 2. The permit for the landfill gas collection and treatment system, we're going to mark as exhibit number 3. And then I see we have a number of photographs. Can we mark those all together? Several pages of photographs. We'll put those all together as one exhibit, and we'll mark it as exhibit number 4. And you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Eland, would you please proceed?
Okay. The Tequesquite landfill is a 120-acre Class 3 landfill located at 5900 Tequesquite Avenue in the city of Riverside, California. It was active from 1947 to 1985 and received post-closure maintenance status on May 10th, 2010 by what's formerly known as the California Integrated Waste Management Board, which is also known as CalRecycle. The city of Riverside owns the Tequesquite landfill, or the closed Tequesquite landfill, and the surrounding boundaries, and is responsible for the gas collection and flaring of, or destruction of methane gas that's existing or produced at the landfill.
Thank you. And what type of equipment is involved in this variance request?
Tequesquite landfill gas collection system, which operates under Exhibit 3, which is permit to operate RF 72428, and the flare permit, which has a permit to operate of G34507, which would be Exhibit 2.
Thank you. Is that equipment operated pursuant to an AQMD permit to operate?
Yes, it is.
And are true and correct copies of those permits attached to the variance petition?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. Can you describe the circumstances that have led to the city seeking a variance?
Yes. On the morning of October 21st, Monday, October 21st, our maintenance manager arrived at work in the early hours of about 5 a.m. and noticed that the landfill flare was not in operation. Upon shift start for normal maintenance staff, about 6 a.m., he dispatched a maintenance mechanic to go checked the site to see what the problem with the flare was. And in turn, when the maintenance staff arrived at the landfill, they discovered that vandalism had occurred. Initially, it looked like the motor control center or the electrical panel of the HVAC system to the building. The fuses were removed and the wiring was messed up. And then they realized that the garden hoses were placed in the compressor skids to flood the compressor skids out, which could cause electrical issues. The repairs took that day into the next day, and when they went to restart the flare, they noticed that other valves, such as the landfill gas valve, instrument air, and compressor lube oil valves had all been readjusted during the vandalism. They made those corrections, and when they tried to restart the flare once again, they were having issues and called out electrical and instrumentation staff, who then diagnosed that the actuator positioner had failed of the flare.
Thank you. So can you tell me why the city of Riverside is seeking an ex parte emergency variance instead of waiting on a short variance?
Tequesquite Landfill had no choice in the matter and had to pursue the ex parte emergency variance due to the vandalism that was caused to the actuator positioner. This was an unforeseen event.
Thank you. And what rule or rules is the landfill violating under the current operating conditions?
Rules 203B, under Exhibit 2, it's conditions 18 and number 27, and under Exhibit 3, it's conditions 4 and 22.
Thank you. And have you considered curtailing operations in lieu of obtaining a variance?
The closed landfill is still continuously producing gas, and there's no way to curtail operations.
And how do you plan to achieve compliance with the applicable requirements?
Up until this morning, the part was ordered on October 23rd, expedited as fast as possible, which we were originally given a 2 to 3 week lead time on receiving that part. As of this morning, we understand that the part is in stock and or at our facility, and staff is currently working on getting it installed this morning.
Thank you. And did the city of Riverside consider renting a flare until the repairs could be made?
Yes, I reached out to Zinc, Arion, and Zico via email. I also called Arion and another company I was referred to as LF&G&E International, who all online stated that they had rental flares. Arion, Zinc, and Zico confirmed they do not have an SCA QMD flare, rental flare available, and LFG&E looks to be out of business.
Thank you. And would emissions have been monitored during this variance, or will they be?
Yes. Ultimately, Friday of last week, the day after we understood that there was a breakdown, our landfill contract company who does air quality monitoring, Ecotech, they did a perimeter probe readings, and they all came back non-detect. And ultimately, with the variance conditions, we have plans set forth to continue monitoring air quality.
So as I understand, non-detect means that there is no methane escaping from this system.
That is my understanding, yes.
Thank you. What would be the effect on the city of Riverside customers and public if the variance is denied?
Tequesquite Landfill would be liable for civil penalties for violations of Rule 203 and Rule 1150.1 because they are not in compliance due to unknown person breaking into the facility and vandalizing the equipment.
Thank you. And what improvements have been made, and are there upcoming projects at the landfill?
Yeah, the current flare was installed August 2018. It's a new Arion flare. It's a CEB 350. Not only provides ultra-low NOx, it is also has a very high VOC destruction efficiency of 99.9%. Cost for the total flare install was $926,000. In our current fiscal year, which is years 2019 and 2020, compliance staff has budgeted $200,000 for the installation of a blower fan, which will reduce electrical demand compared to the compressors, as well as $10,000 for a phase 1 of the wellhead replacement program on the cap of the well.
Thank you. In your experience, have you ever seen any vandalism or any break-ins related to this flare facility at all on this site?
The flare facility has never had a break-in since I've been there that I've seen or known about. The perimeter fence of the landfill itself does have ongoing break-in issues, but we have a fence contractor come out and make repairs immediately to that area.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes my direct questioning of the witness.
Thank you very much. Ms. Honey Zavra, do you have any questions?
Just one quick one, because I missed it. Can you please, Mr. Eland, repeat again the permit conditions that you're seeking a variance from?
Yes, under the flare permit of G 34507, condition 18 and 27. And under RF 72428, conditions 4 and 22.
Thank you. That's all I have for now.
I had a question on that, actually. Why do you feel you need relief from condition 27 for the flare permit, which has to do with reporting breakdowns, I believe?
This likely, if I could summarize prior discussions, this is to get retroactive coverage for the fact that we did not understand it was not operating at that time.
Okay, then I should stop you there, because you may notice, maybe you did not, but in the ex parte minute order, I did not grant that relief because we don't give retroactive relief for variances.
Okay.
So we'll remove that as what you're seeking. And, okay, so Mr. Eland, I think you did testify, but I just want to be clear. So is it your testimony that you are in compliance with all of the conditions of the ex parte minute order? They included the monitoring, which you did say you did.
In agreement of the proposed variance conditions that we...
That's correct.
Yes,
No, not an agreement. Are you in compliance with any of the conditions that were required of the ex parte minute order? So the ex parte minute order had, number one, expediting to the maximum extent feasible the repairs. Obviously, you had testimony with regard to the part being on site already, investigating whether there was a temporary or various location permitted device, and you testified as to your efforts to locate a portable or temporary flare. If you want to take a moment just to look through those conditions and make sure that you can represent to the board that any that have come due, that you are in compliance with each of those. You can take a moment if you wish.
We will need a minute. He had a red line version, and we're going to verify the final version right now.
Okay. Just to be clear, we're looking at the ex parte minute order. Do you have that? The minute order that you received? Would you like to go off the record to have a copy? Did you not receive a copy of the conditions? So you never got the conditions? No. Okay. So I don't know how you could be, how did you know to, let me ask Mr. Elon, how did you know to look into a temporary flare? Ms. Honey Zavra has.
We received proposed variance conditions the evening after I filed the ex parte emergency variance,
Okay.
but we did not receive any minutes to that. So we had a general understanding, but that's about it.
Okay. Ms. Honey Zavra, did you have?
So the attorney that handled the ex parte submitted proposed variance conditions for that, and then we obtained those conditions from her, and those are the conditions that we shared with petitioner, but we didn't receive an actual minute order.
Chair, as to the temporary flare, it just seemed like something that we would be asked, so we proactively went out and tried to find one.
Okay. The clerk's office was short-staffed and very overloaded with emergency, as you can imagine, emergency requests. We still are from the fires. However, the minute order should have been received because it was signed on the 25th. But those conditions that so you had those conditions that were proposed by the district.
Correct.
And that's how you knew to monitor emissions, possible emissions, and also to seek out temporary control devices?
Correct.
Okay. So can you testify that of those conditions that you were aware that you were in compliance with those?
Should we run through 1 through 10 and have him affirmatively state on the record?
Yeah, there were 15 conditions, but some of them likely. Just give us a minute. So, okay, so for example, well, there are no excess emissions, so no fees were due. Let's just go off the record for a moment, just to review those. Did you, Ms. Honeyzava, do you have a copy that we can? No? Okay. Why don't we go off the record and have a copy of the minute order?
That'll be great, please, thank you.
And that way we can go through that. Okay, we're off the record to get Yes, okay. We're back on the record. And we have, while we were off the record, we have made sure, unfortunately a little bit late, but that the petitioner has a copy of the final ex parte minute order, which includes the final conditions. And so have you had a moment to review those?
We have, thank you very much. And we have a couple of revisions that we would propose for conditions 4, 5, 6.
Well, I'm sorry. Are we looking at the proposed variance conditions for the emergency variance?
I have the ex parte minute order, and these are the proposed conditions under section 5 on page 2 of 4.
Okay, unfortunately, those were the final conditions. So I understand that for some reason, the final conditions were not sent to you as part of an ex parte minute order, but those were the conditions. So the question is, have you complied with what you thought were the conditions, and to what extent do you believe perhaps that you have not met those conditions, or where do we stand on them?
We have complied with all of the proposed variance conditions which were given to us, with the exceptions of those requiring action within 7 days after the variance is granted. And we anticipate not needing that because this should be fixed today or tomorrow at the latest, and tomorrow is the 7th day.
I was going to say it's not 7 days yet. Okay, okay.
So with the exception of those, yes, we have.
Okay, perfect. That's, and I'm sorry, but if Mr. Eland if you could say that on the record, yes. Have you
Yes,
been
we
in
have
compliance
complied
with those that have come due?
That have come due, correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
I did, one question on that. Under number 13, it talks about payment made within 15 days. It's a concern for the city that sometimes our procurement process does not process checks within 15 days. And it's very difficult sometimes, and if we could get a 25-day time on that, that would ease a burden.
Which number are you?
Page 3 of 4, number 13.
Mr. Eland's referring back to the conditions on the,
ex
Number
parte.
13.
Number 13.
Okay. Okay, we can discuss that when we are, when we make it to the merits, which, so we're still in the good cause, so, I'm trying to think if I had any more questions on good cause. I think that's it. Anyone else have questions on good cause? Mr. Balagopalan?
Mr. Eland, just to clarify, when did you say this new flare was installed?
I believe it was, their initial source test was August 2018.
2018?
That's correct.
That's one. Now, I noticed that the permit to construct was issued in 2015.
We extended that multiple times because it was part of a greater expansion, and then due to budget concerns, it just got extended a lot longer.
All right, that clears it. From the pictures that, the exhibit number 1, we can look at the, you don't have that on the computer, right? So that's okay. We can look at this one. Looks like downwind from where the landfill is, there are homes down the hill, is it? Are those residential homes southeast of the facility?
Those are residential homes, and they're actually above the landfill.
Above the landfill, okay.
Google Maps doesn't give the perception
Right,
of height, but
So have you, since the flare has not been operating, received any complaints, or have you notified the residents in the area about the issue?
we have not received any complaints, and I do not believe any notification has been made.
Now, right now, the compressor's all working, so the gas, where's the gas? The gas has still been collected, right? Because you still have negative pressure?
No, we do not have, the compressors are shut off as well.
Oh, the compressor's shut off right now? Oh, okay. So, all right, so that's shut off. Okay. Then let me, I just want to understand some of the other pictures that you, that was in the part of the exhibit, so
And you need this for good cause, correct?
yeah, I just,
Okay.
right, what measures they've taken, so if you can go to exhibit number 4, if you can just go through the one by one, 4 to, and explain what they are, so we understand what.
Yeah, so this is the perimeter fence on the west side of the landfill, where on my exhibit 1, where it says homeless populations, they live between the landfill boundary and the river. These are taken monthly, during like a monthly inspection. And these are the damages we see that are caused by the homeless population. And again, typically within a week or two, these fence repairs are made again, mostly by the solar contractor who makes the repairs to the fence line. But the landfill also has a budget to make fence repairs if something's not taken care of, in the budget that we handle as well. So they're just an assortment of different pictures, depending on what order you may have them. You'll see a picture of a fence with debris behind it with a gate, a small little man gate. That fence was installed by the homeless people on our perimeter fence. Those are some of the troubles that we face with on a daily basis out there. They borrowed a gate and fencing material from an internal fence at the landfill and then installed it on their own. There is an access road on the west side of the landfill that they use to ferry north-south, and it's faster than walking the river trail. So that's what we assume to be the reason why they access the landfill. The two pictures, the pictures of the flare, the white gate and the brick wall, that's the flare facility. And the single picture, those are just show the basic security, or the security that we have at the facility of the flare station.
So you mentioned there were two flares, so the other one is not, is just sitting as a spare, for spare parts, is that?
The other flare is at the Regional Water Quality Control Plant. The Regional Water Quality Control Plant has a CEB 350 as well as the landfill. And the Regional Water Quality Control Plant also has a CEB 1200 as well.
The question, and I don't know if you know, what exactly is the flare stack temperature positioner? Do you happen to know?
I do not know.
Okay.
We actually do have a witness who can explain that, and he was sworn in. He stood during the oath, if you would like to hear.
Let's finish with Mr. Eland first. Mr. Dugo-Peralta has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the last picture where it's the cinder block and the barbed wire, the rounded barbed wire on the top. Is it, is the reason why you don't have it any further than that along the homeless area, is that because it's cost prohibitive to have put a cinder block fence versus a chain link?
I can't speak. I mean, the cost may have been an issue on the western side of the landfill facility, but also, as reminded by Mr. Bowman, that there's a landfill cap that can only have limited structures, and weight would be an issue on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Eland on good cause? Senator.
Ex parte conditions, number 7. It was discussed, I'm sure, at that hearing, and it talks about collecting integrated landfill service samples, except in those cases where the inaccessibility, dangerous condition for the technician. What would be the dangerous conditions for the technicians at that point in time?
I'm sorry, are we looking at the ex parte, what, number 7?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, okay. So in the event the petitioner is unable to sample the landfill surface area and grid due to excessively dangerous conditions. Yes, solar would be one issue where it's inaccessible. But ultimately, attachment 2.0 talks about you can't sample above certain wind conditions or with certain rain events. I think it's 2.2.1 and 2.2.2. So that would be the real limiting factor. I think in our conversations with Sherry that we talked about, these were additional conditions on top of what Rule 1150.1 Attachment A 2.0 discusses as well.
what's the inaccessibility and dangerous conditions for a technician?
Yeah, the solar panels,
The solar panels?
yes.
Okay. Now, these homeless have been there for how long, living there, based on your recollection?
I've been here for 4 years. I do not remember a major problem up until about a year and a half to 2 years
But they were
ago.
there when you were there for
Yes.
4 years.
Yes,
We had this problem before with the homeless.
not at the Flare facility, no.
Never did. What have you done to secure the landfill henceforth?
I believe that the facility itself is secured. We have not had the issue. And with the razor wire and so forth, that it's in a double fenced area as well.
The razor wire was installed last few days, or was it there before?
It was there before.
So therefore, even though the razor wire was there, the facility obviously was not secure because they had access, or obtained access, and caused the damage, as you say.
To my understanding, they've never gained access prior to the issue we had on October 21st.
How did they gain access? What did they do to the fence or razor wire or whatever to gain access to the landfill?
They may have scaled the razor wire, or through hearsay, we've understood that there's a locksmith down living in that population and can access gates that way.
So there was no obvious destruction
No, there was
of
not.
the razor wire.
That is correct.
So you then therefore conclude it was the locksmith.
I can't, that was an assumption.
Assuming it was a locksmith, and you want to make sure that didn't happen again, what action would you take to make sure that it's secured, notwithstanding there might be a locksmith nearby?
We're looking at what our communications ability is to put additional monitoring in through our SCADA system right now.
Repeat that, I'm sorry, sir.
We're looking at other alternatives that, we have used 900 megahertz radio communication out there, and we're looking at what the possibility to add additional security measures out there.
What additional security measures you have in mind?
Excuse me, Member Holden, we have another witness who can actually speak more to those particular issues. If you would like me to call him up and you can speak to him.
At the appropriate time.
Yeah, we will do that probably in a moment, because it looks like it's the same witness that would answer Mr. Balagopalan's other question. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Eland? Dr. Bernstein?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just need to clarify. Currently, there is no methane escaping the system?
In the first initial perimeter probe sampling, there was no methane escaping.
That was done when?
Friday of last week.
Friday last week. So obviously, there's no collection being done. There's lost negative pressure that it is imminent that will occur. The gas will start to, the gas.
At a point, yes.
Right. Okay. I just want to clarify looking through the prism of what needs to be documented to make good cause. I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Eland before we move on to the next witness? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Eland. We will, if we could hear from your next witness on those outstanding questions and any other testimony you wish for good cause.
Thank you. I'd like to call Mr. Ed Philadelphia. Mr. Philadelphia, could you please give your full name for the record, your employment at the City of Riverside, and affirm that you took the oath to testify?
Yes, my name is Edward Philadelphia, and it's spelled Philadelphia. I am the Technical and Compliance Manager at the Riverside Regional Water Quality Control Plant. I oversee all compliance for all the facilities that come under our preview. And I also address technical issues and do planning events and work on the capital projects and other things like that. So more future of what we're planning from this point forward on issues.
How long have you held that position at the city?
I've been with the city at that position for over 10 years.
Thank you. And did you stand and take the oath to testify truthfully in this hearing?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. So I have no further direct questions. The board is free to question the witness.
I'll ask Ms. Honey's-Alvarez, did you have any questions?
No questions for this witness.
Okay, let's start with Mr. Balagopalan, because you had question, and then Senator had question.
Yes, I wanted to get a little clarification on what exactly is the flare stack temperature position of controller is, and what happened to, that and why that need to be replaced.
Yes, this design flare, which is an Arian flare, and it's been under different ownerships over many years. Initially, when I became familiar with it, probably 12 years ago, the technology, it was called the Beckart. It was a Beckart flare from Europe, and it's as we mentioned before, it's probably one of the lowest NOx producing flares available, and it also has a high destruction efficiency. We chose that particular piece of equipment when we were doing our plant expansion that we started in 2012. And when it came up to do the flare replacement for the landfill, we made the decision to buy another one so that we would have all the same technology for maintenances and spare parts to place there. And that's when we completed that project last year. Now, what you're particularly talking about is part of integral of a control system. It operates a lot differently than a standard flare. So there's 2 points of control. Excuse me. One is that there's a valve positioner. So during startup phase, the valve positioner has preset locations that allow the gas to flow in very slowly and through the ignition sequence. If gas flows in too quick, the flame lifts off this stainless steel pad and will rise up, propagate through the flare, and once it gets above the thermocouple, the flare was shut down on low temperature. So basically that valve tries to keep, during a startup phase, tries to keep the flame on top of this stainless steel mesh, kind of similar to a water heater burner.
You say there are two parts to it. Mm-hmm. What's the other function it does?
The valve positioner?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it goes in there, and then once it's fully open, it just goes to open, and then also during a shutdown, if it senses it needs to do a shutdown, it's one of the valves that closes along with a master shut-off valve.
So that mesh can go up and down, is that what you're saying?
No, the mesh does not move. It's the flame, it's fixed.
The flame,
so you get this nice blue flame over the top of the mesh, just like a water heater.
Right.
All the destruction occurs there. Very good oxygen air control, so you're able to get very good NOx, very low NOx numbers.
And so that got damaged, is that what happened?
No, just the valve, the positioner of the valve. The valve would not move and find its position.
And was it partly due to the vandalism that occurred?
Well, because it's pretty new, what we're thinking is that obviously when the vandals came in, they started the flare, everything was running. And so they started doing stuff, and so it didn't go into probably normal shut-off mode is what we suspect. And so it probably hung up. Sometimes it happens, it might still thought it was on, had the signal, was kept on trying to find something, moving back and forth, and got stuck somewhere and then burned out. Or the card got fried when the power got disconnected. So that, we haven't really investigated that far into there. But like what testimony was provided before, we've, basically this is a $900 part. And it's not on the spare part inventory recommended by the manufacturer, and it's unique. It's different than the one that we have at the treatment plant. So we didn't have any of that interchangeability. So we also have another one on order, or it might have came in this package because this is relatively new news to us that it actually was delivered. So I haven't had a chance to follow up and see what was actually everything that was delivered to us.
And the testimony was that those parts were not available in the country, Beckard?
Right. Yeah, when maintenance put the request in to order the part, they were informed that the part is not available in the United States. It would have to come in from China.
And that's where it did come.
And that's where it came from.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Senator, you had questions, and then Ms. Verdugo Peralta had a
Right,
question.
I asked a question regarding number 7 and securing the property. You heard the question before.
Yes.
Are we able to respond?
Yes, I can. When I think you're asking, one of the questions you asked was what we're planning, what we're going to do from this point forward in doing that, in looking at that.
Given that it might have been a locksmith.
Right. That's an anecdotal that came from our contractor that does the measuring. They have a lot more contact with the homeless people that are wandering around the facility, and they found a vehicle that was on the other side of the gate, and the contractor was saying, "Hey, we have to leave. You got to get out of here. I've got to close this gate." And the person that was there says, "Oh, don't worry about it. We have a locksmith." So it's hearsay, but it kind of fits some of the issues where we don't see people in there. We don't see the breach of the fence, and then you have the homeless gate, which was an ongoing battle with that. I said, cut the lock, put our own lock on it, and we'd come back and our lock would be cut off, and they would have their own lock on it. And the homeless situation down in that area has been getting worse, and the city does do periodic removals, but they're quite expensive, and because homeless have certain rights, the police have to be involved and all this other cleanup, so.
I think it's best if we stick to the question.
Okay,
The question is,
all right.
moving forward, if it is a locksmith that's causing or allowing them to breach and get to the flare, what steps can you take?
Well, we're looking at, right now, when he was mentioning about the 900 hertz on the SCADA, that's the ability to communicate to our facility and tell us what's going on. We're looking at motion sensors to put there so that as soon as we get a detection, we can notify Riverside Police to go out and investigate. This was a big shock to us, and the flooding incident was, luckily it didn't occur, but basically if the flooding would have continued and got up to electronics and damaged the motors and stuff, we could have been down for months. And so we're taking that very seriously, and we're looking at ways to mitigate any possibility that this event can repeat for us.
Are you familiar with the conditions set forth with the ex parte hearing?
Yes, I've seen them.
Okay, look at the condition number 4. I mean, you just got the part in, this component just came in today and so forth. Today or yesterday, it hasn't been installed.
It's being installed right now as we speak.
So therefore, under those circumstances, being installed, you could not comply with condition number 4. Could not have complied. The question was asked, have you complied with these conditions? And someone said yes. How could you do that?
I believe condition number 4 is 7 days, and that the 7th day would be tomorrow, and we're more than prepared to have our contractor go out and start the monitoring.
And then let me just clarify that
7 days after the
let me
variance.
clarify, the answer was with those conditions that have already come due, meaning that they already, it's already been 7 days, or they those they are in compliance with. The others, they don't have to be in compliance with yet. These conditions were put in place because at the time, as you've heard the testimony, there was a lead time of 2 to 3 weeks to get the part from China, and so it was unknown at the time by the district staff and by the chair whether or not, how long it might be that this would be in place.
7 days after the variance. Which variance are we talking about? The ones that conditions are ex parte?
That's correct. The only ones that are relevant when we get past good cause will be Exhibit A. Exhibit A are the proposed conditions moving forward for the emergency. I asked the question about the conditions of the ex parte variance, just so that I can take that into account for good cause.
These conditions are not applicable at this time.
That was that's what, when we reviewed the proposed conditions, that's what we based all of our decisions on. So we've put in play, we've already contacted our contractor, already told him about this increased monitoring that we may have to do. He's provided us with what the additional cost would be, which is basically, it's around $13,000 per measurement event,
Right,
for them to come out and do this work for us.
Well, wouldn't it be appropriate for the condition number 4 would be part of the conditions that we're considering today, rather than at that point in time?
I believe they are proposed to be part of.
Okay, thank you.
I would make a request, and perhaps this is best made later when we get to the merits, but this could be a conditional imposition. If we don't have it up and running today or tomorrow, within the 7 days, at that point, it would apply, and at that point, we would comply with them.
And we'll consider that request once we get to that part of the hearing. Mr. Verdugo Peralta, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on the fact that you're going to have such a large cost to repair all of this, is that gate still there that the homeless have installed?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any plans on removing it and replacing it with your own equipment or a different type of gate?
No, not at this time.
So they're still going to have access?
Yeah, that gate is not access to the flare. It's a perimeter gate. It's access into the landfill. So either it gets cut, and then we go back and repair it, or like I said, we've put other locks on there, and the homeless population has pretty much all the tools they need to break into things, and it is a fairly remote site. That's why we're focusing more on like motion sensors, so we can respond. As soon as somebody gets in there, we could dispatch Riverside Police Department to go in and investigate.
Okay, earlier it was discussed that the public was not notified of this. So the general public has no knowledge that this is an ongoing problem?
Not at this time.
For clarification, that what is an ongoing problem?
Yeah, I wanted clarification as well.
The ongoing problem of the vandalization, if they've gotten into it this time, I don't think that's going to stop them a second time.
Okay, the city, like all cities in Southern California, has an ongoing problem with the homeless, and the city of Riverside actually has a very progressive and active homeless program. We have Housing First, we have the mayor's outreach team, we conduct periodic sweeps, and these all have to be done within the legal confines of the settlement which recently happened in Orange County. The city does every possible thing they can, but within the bounds of humanity and treating these people humanely, there's only so much you can do. If they're going to live in the river bottom in tents, you can't just rouse them out. So the city does everything they can, and the general public is well aware of this. In fact, we're in the midst of elections for city council, and you can take judicial notice of the fact that homelessness issues are being judiciously debated on this matter. But the Tequesquite landfill is separate from the flare facility. One has a very long chain link fence, which is, you can't put block wall up on top of cap. The flare facility is independently secured, and it has much more and better security in it. And the testimony has been that we are going to improve it. They want to put in motion sensors and additional security because this was unexpected. It's never been vandalized before. We have no idea who would do this or why they would do it. We're presuming it was the homeless. It could have been youths. We don't know.
I was going
But
to say that.
we are absolutely upgrading the security because, these are bills we have to pay to fix it.
And the difference, as was testified to, if we look at Exhibit 4, the photographs, the first page depicts the perimeter fence, correct? And then the last page shows the concrete wall around the flare. Is that correct? So that's the difference between the two?
The pictures,
If you can just identify yourself, if you're different from the Mr. Philadelphia.
Robert Eland. The picture that has the concrete block walls with the white wrought iron gates, and the picture of the block wall with the razor wire on top, that is the perimeter of the flare facility. The chain link fences, those are the perimeter of the landfill itself.
Thank you. Any other questions without getting, I don't want to get further into the issue of surrounding populations. No, I don't mean that. I mean, I don't want to get into the surrounding populations or those issues.
It's more my concern is, okay, you've got the chain link fence around the landfill, and then you have the block wall around the flare, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so whoever did the vandalization went over the block wall?
That's what we're assuming, or, somehow was able to open the gate. So that's the big unknown. Motion sensor would help us find out if something like that was happening.
Okay, thank you.
Senator.
Motion sensor. And if someone gained access to the property, you're saying the police would come out and check, is that correct?
Yes.
How far away was that? What's the timeline for the police to get there? Estimated.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to say
Well,
that.
you should want to find out.
We routinely use motion sensors at our lift stations that are unmanned, and the response is usually fairly quick to those. The city has a population of 325,000 people, so we're a fairly good-sized city. And the motion sensors have been quite successful in deterring break-ins and stuff from being stolen at our lift stations.
For this landfill to become inoperative, it's already been determined that it's very costly, time delay, and finances. Is that correct?
Could you repeat your question?
Should this landfill become inoperative, like it's not working, for whatever reason, where it's not working anymore?
This is a closed landfill.
Yeah.
It operated in 1947, soon after World War II, and pretty much we closed it. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact time that we stopped receiving material, but we got our final closure permit from the state in 2010. So. Oh, it's February 1985 was the date that the landfill closed.
Right, but you have gas flares coming in.
Right.
Okay, fine.
And that's going to continue on for years. We had project earlier where we had a pipeline sending the gas to the treatment plant where we had a cogen project, but because the landfill is not operational anymore, it's not receiving new material, over time, the amount of gas being produced is dropping, and also the quality of the gas is deteriorating. So really now it's just managing the gas until it stops producing gas.
So you don't think it's necessary to have security at the site, human, just in case the motion sensor is breached?
Having people there, just from our experience, we have a man at the, when we were doing our plant expansion at our treatment plant, we hired security because when we had contractors there and we had equipment there, it was a big candy store for people to break in and steal stuff. We had security there. We had plant operations there for at night, overnight, for 2 people to kind of monitor the process. And we include security that we do perimeters. And we would still get break-ins and things stolen, even having one person there. Our our best approach is going with the motion sensor and trying to get the police to respond to the break-ins, rather than having a security person there be put at any type of risk, because they don't have the proper training to deal with maybe multiple people that might have issues. So we kind of we would discourage that.
Mr. Balagopalan.
Mr. Philadelphia, when was the solar panel installed on the landfill? Do you, approximately, if you know?
Probably, I would say 2015, 16? Is that, yeah.
Do you know if there was a revised plan submittal to the, because now that area below it is not accessible for monitoring, is that correct?
Yeah, some of it's not, some of it is accessible to doing some monitoring, but there are other locations. You know, we have, I think we have over 200 extraction wellheads that are there to try to keep the negative pressure under the dome, and so the gas is all being drawn towards those spots and then brought to the flare when it's in operation.
Do you happen to know if there was a revision to the monitoring plan that was submitted to the agency, because those?
Yeah, we have an alternate plan that's submitting, and I think it's pending with the that's pending with staff, South Coast staff right now.
Are we going far afield of good cause?
No, because there's one of the condition to integrate monitoring, and it's not accessible. So
Right, but that's more for the merits. I'm talking about
Oh,
good
yeah,
cause.
okay.
Are we
No,
far
no.
afield of
Yeah,
good cause?
it
I think
probably
we've
is,
gone
yes.
far afield of
Yes,
good
I think
cause,
we have.
but
Okay, I'm sorry.
but I think we're going further afield. Anyone else have questions on good cause, so we could deliberate on that and then move forward if we find good cause? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Eland. I'm sorry, Mr. Philadelphia. And did you have any other witnesses you wish to present, Mr. Beaumont, on good cause?
No, Chair, I have no other witnesses I need to present. If there are any outstanding issues, I can determine if there's anybody else, but it's unlikely.
Thank you very much. Ms. Honey-Zavra, do you wish to present any witnesses on good cause?
The district has no affirmative witnesses to present on good cause, but I have two air quality engineers and one district inspector here should the board have any questions on good cause, and they will also be here to testify on the merits.
Does anyone have any questions for a district witness on good cause? Okay, thank you very much. All right, so at this time, if you would like to make any closing statement on good cause, you may do so now, Mr. Beaumont.
Thank you. So as the good cause findings are discussed in the section 1 of the ex parte minute order, as this explains, the city has actually moved quickly and responsibly. We have done everything possibly we could to expedite the obtaining this part, installing the part. This is a first-of-a-kind event. We've never had anybody scale the cinder block wall and concertina wire to get into a flare. Who does that? We've never had this or seen this before. As you've heard from the testimony, we still don't know how they got in. So this is something we're going to address, and certainly we are going to upgrade the security. The actual particulars of the security, I mean, this is not something that the two witnesses today are personally responsible for obtaining, but the city is going to upgrade the security. The city has acted quickly and in good faith, and we hope we have met the requirements for good cause. We expect that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Honey-Zavra. Any closing on good cause?
Good morning again, Chairwoman Prusak and members of the board. Based on the evidence that's been presented here today, the district does not oppose a finding of good cause. It's encouraging that petitioner has expedited repairs and has received the component necessary to make all repairs today, and is probably be installing it today as well. And again, just to reiterate, petitioner acted diligently, at least as far as we believe, to conduct repairs soon after the flare was vandalized and file for emergency relief. So again, the district does not oppose the finding of good cause.
Thank you. Board members, anyone wish to begin deliberation? Mr. Balagopalan?
Yeah, I believe we can find good cause. I think when the petitioner was diligent in filing for the ex parte, when they found out about the fact that the flare was not working, and then also that they ordered the parts, and as the parts are here now, and they should be hopefully in operational either today or tomorrow. So, and we know they're in violation of the 1150 and permit conditions, and some conditions that were mentioned. Do I have to go through those conditions specifically? No, right? No.
No, I
Yeah.
think it's very clear that there is a
A
violation.
violation, yeah. And I think they were diligent in petitioning for the variance, and I think the denial of the variance will have adverse impact, because they need to continue to work and get the flare up and operating.
Anyone else? Ms. Verdugo Peralta?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also agree that there is good cause here and appreciate all of the work that your staff has done to make sure that this is coming back online. The only suggestion I would make in your monitoring would be not just motion sensors, but possibly also cameras, remote cameras. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree good cause can be found. I was able to find it for the ex parte, and it's a serious issue if it were to continue and be ongoing, which is why we're here today for the emergency. So as Ms. Honey-Zavra mentioned, I find it very encouraging that the first thing you said when you came in this morning was the part is here. And also the second thing that was very comforting is that as of Friday, there seems to be no methane escaping the site, which is very fortunate. And I do believe this has never happened before to the flare. The flare seemed to have been pretty well protected as compared to the rest of the landfill site, and it has never happened before. And as far as diligence is concerned, while they knew sometime around the 21st or 22nd that it had occurred, they attempted to repair it, knowing that they have this flare with replacement parts. So it's not like they spun their wheels, but only to find later that there is this one part, which actually is not on the spare part list of the manufacturer. I think that's important too, of which they do not have a spare. And so they filed pretty quickly after that. So we're quite diligent. So, and clearly they would have continuing fines were they not to receive relief. Anyone else wish to just have a discussion on good cause? Okay. I can make a motion then. In the matter of City of Riverside, Tequesquite landfill, case number 6157-1, I move that we find good cause to proceed with a hearing on the merits for this emergency variance in absence of notice to the public. And that's based on the deliberations we just had and making of the findings for good cause. Mr. Balagopalan seconded first, so I will take Mr. Balagopalan second. We've got a competition going. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Senator, how do you vote? Dr. Bernstein, how do you vote? Ms. Verdugo Peralta, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Balagopalan, you vote? I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. And so the first matter we'll do is to, unless there's any objection, incorporate all of the evidence and testimony we have just heard as part of the good cause finding. Is there any objection to that?
That's a fantastic idea. The city has no objection.
The district has no objection.
Okay, so we have incorporated all the record, which includes those exhibits that were, that we have marked, including the proposed conditions, which now become a lot more relevant. And let's take our break. And when we come back, and then also during the break, Mr. Beaumont, if you could just take a look at the 6 findings that we need for a variance. Most of them were likely covered. And so all we'll need to do is to fill in any gaps in testimony and evidence.
I will, thank you.
And we'll certainly go over those conditions and I know you had some questions regarding the conditions, and we can work through that as well. So let's take a short break until 20 of, so we'll come back at 10:40. We're off the record. says the hearing
All
was
air
not on?
pollution disappear.
We're back on the record, and I was just going to magic us back into this hearing. However, Dr. Bernstein would like me to make all air pollution disappear. I wish I could do that. Okay, so we're back, and we're back with the merits of the emergency variance. And Mr. Beaumont, would you like to have an opening statement on the 6 findings needed for a variance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would. Again, Anthony Beaumont. I am a deputy city attorney for the city of Riverside. Now, we have agreed to incorporate the testimony heard during the good cause portion. And so reflecting upon that testimony, I think that we can make these 6 findings. And forgive me for doing this, but it's the lawyer in me. I'm going to go through them seriatim one at a time. So the first finding would be that the city of Riverside would be in violation of any rule, regulation, or order of the district short of the variance. And I think we've established that we would be, because currently we are unable to flare off the methane gas, which as required. The second finding would be that due to conditions beyond the reasonable control of Riverside, requiring compliance would result in either an arbitrary or unreasonable taking of property or the practical closing or elimination of a lawful business. Now, these, given that it was a first-of-a-kind event and we've never had any kind of intrusion into this cinder block secure flare area, it would be beyond the reasonable control of petitioner, and it would be to deny us the variance and to charge us the penalties instead would be an arbitrary or unreasonable taking of property. And this is the public property. It's the public fisc. This comes right out of taxpayers in the city of Riverside. Another finding is that the closing or taking would be without corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants, and that's for sure. Without the variance, we would not be allowed to operate. We would not be able to flare this. And so everybody agrees that we want to get this ultra low NOx flare up and running as soon as possible. During the period the variance is in effect, that the applicant will reduce excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible. Feasibility here is an issue. There's nothing really we can do to stop the generation of methane. But as we discussed before, it was operated under negative pressure prior, and we have yet to detect the actual excursion of methane. So even though this is not within our control, it still appears as though there are no actual emissions, and we hope there won't be. And during the period that the variance is in effect, that the applicant or the city of Riverside will monitor or otherwise quantify emission levels from the source. And we have done that, and we will continue to do so. So those are the 6 findings that have to be made, and we believe that we have provided testimony during the prior portion of this hearing for that. And if there are any other questions or if there's any other testimony necessary, we would be glad to provide the evidence for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Honey-Zavra, your opening.
Good morning once again, Chairwoman Prusak and members of the board. Subject to the evidence and the testimony that we hear today, in addition to the evidence and the testimony that's been incorporated from the good cause portion of the hearing, which I believe covered a fair amount of what's necessary for the 6 findings, as well as the proposed conditions, which the district has shared with petitioner and which we've come to an agreement on. The district does not oppose the granting of an emergency variance.
Thank you. And why don't we begin with those proposed variance conditions? Because, Mr. Beaumont, if you could remind the board what you wished to consider or have us consider to amend in these proposed conditions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The conditions that we think should be updated to reflect the facts currently on the ground, that being the recent delivery and the current installation of the part, would be conditions 4, 5, 6, 7, and one more, 13, having to do with the time for payment. So conditions 4, 5, 6, and 7 all reflect the 7 days after the variance is granted. So given that we were able to expedite the part much sooner than the worst case scenario apparently we were presented, this may not extend into the 7 days. So we would request that these 4 conditions be made conditional if we are unable to get the flare up and running before the 7 days, which would be tomorrow.
Let me step back, because I think I muddied the waters earlier in the first part of this hearing by asking about the conditions for the ex parte, which you had not received. However, these proposed conditions would take effect for this emergency variance, not the ex parte, even though the timing, I won't muddy it further. However, the emergency variance that you would or would not be granted today is separate. And so these conditions would take effect 7 days from now.
Okay, well, that makes it even less likely that we would run into these conditions.
However, if you did run into these conditions,
We absolutely
they would know,
will.
how I've envisioned this emergency variance would be until we'd give you 30 days from the time of the ex parte, or until final compliance, which would mean the flare is up and running. So once the flare is up and running, this variance would no longer be effective, and so you would not be subject to the conditions if the flare is up and running. So you don't have to make them conditional. If, under those circumstances, does that make sense to you, or do you still wish to have them amended?
No, it makes perfect sense. If that's the understanding of the board and staff, then the city certainly complies with that, and we think that's a reasonable reading. We're just glad to have it in the record.
Okay.
And that leaves one change that we would request, which is condition number 13 on page 3 of 4. This requires payment within 15 days. We hope you understand that as a public agency. 15 days might be a little bit fast for as quickly as we can cut a check. So if we could extend that to 25 days, that would make it much more likely that we could comply with this. Of course, we're going to get payment to you as quickly as our process allows, but 25 days is a much safer window.
Okay, and the board will consider that and at the appropriate time. But also, just so you know, given that so far there have been no emissions detected, hopefully there will be no fees due, but we'll see at the time. Okay, any other considerations you want to give to amending the proposed
No,
conditions?
we would just like to thank staff and the board for being so helpful and understanding in this situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to turn, Ms. Honeyzava, to you. Is there any questions you had for either of the witnesses on the 6 findings that you don't believe were covered?
No, I believe all of the 6 findings were covered, so we don't have any questions. But we also have our witnesses once again, in case the board has any questions for us once they're through.
Thank you. Board members, do we have any questions?
I just wanted to find out from the compliance inspector if they've received any complaints
You mean for the district?
from the district, yeah.
But first, let me just make sure, hearing board members, does anyone feel they have any more questions or need any additional evidence from the petitioner with regard to the 6 findings before we then move on to the district? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so then let us start with that. Ms. Honeyzava, if you can introduce compliance. Is that what you're looking for, someone with compliance? Okay.
So the district would like to introduce Alicia Lewis. Ms. Lewis, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Good morning, Alicia Lewis. It's Alisha, Lewis, Lewis.
And what is your position here at the district?
I'm an air quality inspector.
And have you taken the oath today?
I did.
So I'm going to attempt to ask what I think is at issue here, but of course I'm going to let the board jump in if there are any questions. Have you visited this particular site since the initial ex parte was filed?
I have.
And have you taken a look at the site's compliance history? Let's see, whether or not they've been issued any NOVs or if there's been any enforcement action, let's say over the course of the past 5 to 10 years?
I have.
And what have you found?
I found that the facility has not received any complaints or notices of violation.
Since what year, if you can
In the
guesstimate?
past 10 years.
Okay. So those are all the questions that I have, but if there are pointed questions about specific complaints received, I turn it over to the board.
Did you have additional questions on that?
Yeah, just, so what day were you out there?
I was out there yesterday.
Yesterday. And there were no complaints called in from the residents?
Correct, there was no complaints.
And when you were out there, did you observe any odors or any,
I did not detect any odors while I was there.
okay, thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if you're the right person, but I just went over with Mr. Beaumont the proposed conditions, and in particular, these monitoring conditions, which were to begin no later than 7 days after the variance is granted. Now that I think upon it, the ex parte was granted, and so the 7th day from that would be tomorrow. That no longer exists. So if we were to adopt these today, now it would be 7 days from today. Given, though, what you've just testified to, no complaints, given what you may have heard earlier about the monitor probe readings having no methane detected, and given that you just testified you were out there yesterday and detected no odors, do you feel that these conditions should come into play sooner than 7 days from now? Not tomorrow, since we think it might be up and running, but what is your position on that, if you have one? And if not, we can bring on a different witness.
Can we have just a moment?
Yes, we're off the record.
Thank you.
We're back on the record.
Okay, so I want to note, maybe at the risk of sounding like I'm testifying, but the district takes no position on whether or not that type of monitoring or the time that it occurs is either moved up or pushed back. Ms. Lewis may not be the right witness, but I have 2 other witnesses from engineering who could testify.
I would like to hear from a witness only because these were originally district staff's proposed conditions. So I just want to make clear for the record whether you do or do not wish to have those readings.
Okay, I'd like to then introduce Stephen Boggs. Mr. Boggs, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
It's Stephen, Stephen, and last name is Boggs, Boggs.
And what is your position here at the district?
Air quality engineer.
And have you taken the oath today?
I did.
Okay, so in response to Chairwoman, did you hear Chairwoman Prusak's question, or should we have it repeated back? Maybe we can
Can
have
you
it
repeat
repeated
it,
back.
please?
Yeah.
Let me try to rephrase it. Are you comfortable since these were originally staff's requested conditions, with a condition for each of these monitoring conditions taking effect 7 days from today? Or do you feel earlier readings are necessary?
I think from our information and kind of, what we've heard today, that we wouldn't expect to receive any, I guess, different information than what we already have that would require, earlier monitoring than what has been proposed, the 7 days.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions for either staff? Although one has sat down, but for anyone.
I do have a question for Mr. Boggs. Are you familiar with condition number 12?
Yes.
And I see there's a number of toxic air contaminants listed in that. Is that based on historical records that those are emitted at that landfill?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other thoughts or questions, I mean? Okay. Thank you. Thank you both very much for testifying. And I think we can then close the hearing. And I'll ask Mr. Beaumont if you have any closing.
I have no closing statement. I believe my opening statement would have covered anything I would seek to say at this point. Thank you.
It was well done and thorough. Thank you. Ms. Honey-Zavra, any closing?
Just short and sweet. Good morning once again. Subject to the evidence and the testimony that we've heard today in both portions of the hearing now, the district does believe that the 6 findings can be met, and so we do not oppose the granting of an emergency variance.
Condition number 13, do you have any opinion on that? Oh, that's up to the discretion of the board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking, but yes, that would be the discretion of the board since it's it's the payments to the board. Board members, anyone wish to begin the 6 finding discussion, or I can do that? Okay, I think we can make the 6 findings pretty easily. They are, I think almost everything we needed, we already received in terms of evidence to support the 6 findings during the good cause phase. And so the findings are pretty similar. The petitioner is in violation of several permit conditions and a subsection of Rule 1150.1 in terms of the vandalization of the flare and it not being able to be in operation at the moment and burn the landfill gas as necessary. This is due to conditions beyond the reasonable control of petitioners since we heard all about the vandalism. This is the first time that's happened. This is a facility that's very well managed, obviously, because we just heard from district staff that there have been no complaints, no NOVs in the last 10 years. And so whatever they were doing up till this point, they have done correctly, and I think it was beyond their reasonable control. And in fact, they're looking at ways to further help to avoid this in the future. The arbitrary or unreasonable taking up property would be if, given that this was all beyond their reasonable control, if we were to not grant them variance protection, they would still not be able to run their flare, but they would simply rack up fines and other penalties for not being in compliance with their permit conditions and the rules of the district. So I can make that finding. I believe that closing or taking would certainly be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. This is serious. We know we've heard a lot about landfills and landfill gas. We've seen in other matters at other landfills where they significantly affect the nearby community. Here we have heard evidence that on Friday there were perimeter readings taken, nothing at that point was leaking out of the landfill, was under negative pressure before. We have estimated potential emissions, and those are listed in the Exhibit A in the proposed conditions number 12. But we also heard testimony that there's no odor as of yesterday, and certainly we have had no complaints. So I can make the finding, because I don't believe that the closing or taking, I do believe that the closing or taking would be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. Curtailment is not an option in lieu of obtaining a variance. The flare is down. We need the flare to go back up again. And they can't stop the landfill gas from being generated. We heard that as the landfill ages, that is less and less gas is produced, but for many years to come, likely, it will continue to be produced. Reducing excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible, I could say from the time that this came in as a petition for ex parte, they've done the best they can to get a part on site. We heard that part is only available overseas, and yet it is already on site when it was originally estimated not to be there for 2 to 3 weeks. So I think that they are working diligently and expeditiously to get the flare back in operation, which is really all they can do. And monitoring will take place under the variance in many of the conditions, but only if it's not back in operation as of tomorrow, which is what is expected.
Address that now, or?
Yeah, I don't see, as part of a motion, I don't see any reason why we would not extend it to 25. This being a city, it's very unlikely that there will be excess emission fees regardless. Usually we don't like conditions that go beyond, that may go beyond how long the variance is in effect. However, I see no reason to not believe that if there are fees due, that the city will pay them. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, we can make the 6 findings. In addition, I think we heard testimony, they did look for a rental unit as a temporary measure, and they could not find any, so it was as part of the ex parte variance condition, so they did do their due diligence there. And the fact that the part is already on site, and they're installing it today, and hopefully after debugging it, they should have it running in a couple of days, so that's very promising.
Thank you for adding that. I forgot to mention that. Anyone else have any thoughts on the findings? Ms. Verdugo-Peralta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to again commend your staff for being so diligent in getting that part as quickly as you could and to get it installed. The fact that you are possibly going to have an ongoing problem and are willing to put money into monitoring it, I think also is very important. So thank you for that, and I do find for the 6 findings.
Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts on the 6 findings? Okay, then I will make a motion. In the matter of City of Riverside, Tequesquite Landfill, case number 6157-1, I move that we grant an emergency variance that would begin today, replacing the ex parte emergency variance, and will go for 30 days or until final compliance, which means that the flare is up and running, whichever comes first. And it is for the facility, the landfill at 5900 Tequesquite something. Well, 5.
Avenue.
Sorry?
No. It's
Avenue, thank you, Avenue, in Riverside. And the equipment is the landfill gas collection and treatment system and the associated flare, as is listed in the minute order for the ex parte. It is from the conditions of the 2 different permits for the gas collection and treatment system and the flare, as are reflected in the minute order for the ex parte, as well as 1150.1 subsection D8, having to do with the necessity to run the flare and burn off and have it be in good working condition. I further move that we have as part of the emergency variance the proposed conditions found in Exhibit A, and the only change would be to to condition number 13, changing the 15-day requirement for the payment of fees to 25. So the word 25 and in the parentheses, the number 25. Excess emissions are actually not anticipated, but if so, they are anticipated to be as are listed in condition number 12 of the conditions, and that completes my motion. Is there a second? Mr. Balagopalan seconds the motion. Is there a discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Senator, how do you vote? Dr. Bernstein, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Verdugo Peralta, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Balagopalan, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Thank you all. For a
Thank
good-
you again.
Good presentation, and happy Halloween. Any other business other than picture taking, board members? Okay, we are adjourned.
Yeah.